The millionaire had planned everything down to the smallest detail, or at least he believed they had. For weeks, the quiet mansion had been his testing ground, every sound echoing with suspicion, every shadow feeding his doubt. Richard Hale was a man who had built his fortune from nothing, clawing his way up through betrayal, loss, and ruthless competition. Wealth had given him comfort, power, and respect, but it had also stolen his peace. After a series of unexplained losses, missing cash, and rumors whispered by people who smiled too politely, Richard became convinced that someone inside his own home was stealing from him. His eyes eventually settled on the last person he ever wanted to doubt, Elena, his maid. She was young, soft-spoken, and efficient, with a kindness that felt almost out of place in a house built on cold marble and steel. She never missed a day of work, never raised her voice, and never once asked for more than what she was paid. But trust, once cracked, poisons even the purest intentions. So Richard devised a trap, simple, cruel, and final. One morning, before leaving for a business meeting, he deliberately left his private safe unlocked and slightly open, stacks of cash clearly visible inside, arranged almost invitingly. Hidden cameras were positioned carefully, and Richard returned earlier than usual, his heart pounding not with anger, but with dread. He told himself this was necessary, that the truth, whatever it was, would finally set his mind at ease. When he entered the room quietly, he saw exactly what he feared: Elena standing before the open safe, her hand reaching inside. Time seemed to freeze. His chest tightened, his throat burned, and a lifetime of disappointment surged up all at once. He stepped forward, ready to confront her, ready to unleash the anger he had been bottling up for weeks. But then something happened that shattered him completely. Elena's hand trembled as she held a small bundle of cash, not with greed, but with panic. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with tears, not triumph. She turned, startled by his presence, and instead of running or fleeing, she fell to her knees. The money slipped from her fingers onto the floor as she sobbed uncontrollably. Through broken breath, she confessed, not to theft, but to desperation. Her younger brother was dying. Hospital bills had crushed her family, and she had begged every institution for help, sold everything she owned, and still it wasn't enough. That morning, while cleaning, she had noticed the safe open and panicked, not because she wanted to steal, but because she wanted to put money back. Days earlier, she had secretly taken a small amount, fully intending to return it once she got paid, too ashamed and afraid to ask for help. She had even written a note, folded neatly in her pocket, apologizing and promising to leave once she repaid every cent. Richard stood there, the weight of his assumptions crashing down on him. All his wealth, all his power, and yet he had never once asked her about her life. He had seen her as a role, not a human being. As she cried, expecting to be fired, arrested, or humiliated, Richard felt something unfamiliar burning behind his eyes. Tears. For the first time in decades, he realized how poor he truly was inside. He helped her up, apologized with a sincerity that shook his own voice, and did something no amount of money had ever taught him to do, he listened. That day, he paid for her brother's treatment in full, doubled Elena's salary, and tore down every hidden camera in his house. But the real change wasn't financial, it was human. Richard learned that traps don't catch thieves, they reveal the hearts of those who set them. And Elena learned that honesty, even when born from fear, can still lead to compassion. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect on trust and humanity, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because the next story might just change the way you see the world too. After that unforgettable day, the mansion felt different, lighter, almost alive with a sense of honesty that had never existed before. Richard Hale, the millionaire who had spent his life guarding wealth and suspicion, now began to see his home not as a fortress of fear, but as a place where trust could exist. Elena returned to her duties, but the way she moved through the rooms was no longer timid or fearful. There was a subtle confidence in her steps, an ease in her smile that told everyone, even the walls themselves, that she had nothing to hide. Richard watched from the grand staircase as she organized the living room, straightened the cushions, and gently placed a bouquet of fresh flowers on the table. Her actions were small, ordinary, yet they struck him with the realization that life's true treasures were often invisible, quiet, and human. The cameras that had once captured her every move now collected dust in a drawer, a silent reminder of the fear and suspicion that had consumed him. But the story was far from over. News of Elena's bravery and honesty began to spread among the staff. Her willingness to admit her mistake, explain her desperate situation, and yet continue working with integrity, inspired a ripple effect. The cook, the gardener, even the driver, began to speak with more openness, to share their concerns without fear of judgment. Richard found himself listening more than he ever had before. In those conversations, he discovered stories of struggle, sacrifice, and quiet courage that humbled him. He began to understand that wealth, while powerful, could never replace empathy or connection. Elena's brother's treatment progressed well, and soon he was on the path to recovery. Elena's relief was palpable, and Richard, who had never felt so connected to another human being, often found himself visiting the hospital with flowers or a book to bring comfort. Slowly, the millionaire began to shed the armor of suspicion he had built over decades. He even held small gatherings at his mansion, inviting neighbors and friends, sharing meals, and listening, truly listening, to the stories of others. The transformation wasn't just in Richard, it was in the entire household. Fear gave way to trust, suspicion to understanding, and walls of marble and steel seemed less imposing than the war mth of human connection. And yet, the most powerful lesson came quietly, in the moments no one noticed. Richard would sometimes catch Elena staring out a window, lost in thought, a small smile on her face. And they realized that honesty, even when shadowed by desperation, could spark change far beyond one moment, one save, or one act of fear. The day Elena's brother was discharged from the hospital, the mansion erupted with celebration, simple laughter, heartfelt hugs, and tears of joy. Richard, standing beside her, felt an unfamiliar lightness in his chest. The money, the business deals, the luxury, it was all secondary. What mattered was trust, compassion, and the courage to act rightly, even when it was difficult. That day, he made a promise to himself and to Elena, that he would protect integrity, nurture honesty, and never again let suspicion cloud his judgment. Their bond, once defined by fear and misunderstanding, had now become one of mutual respect and genuine care. And to you, watching this story unfold, remember, sometimes, the smallest act of honesty or kindness can change someone's life forever. If you felt inspired by Elena's courage and Richard's transformation, subscribe to our channel and join us for more stories that touch hearts, reveal truths, and remind us that humanity is the greatest wealth of all.